Alright, so with Type Moon releasing the Road to LB6, I decided that we're going to be doing our own Road to LB6 and break down every main chapter in FGO all the way up to that point, starting with Fuyuki. So we wake up in the FGO version of Fuyuki alongside Mash and our companion foe, and Ritsuka, who is the main character, finds out that he's been race shifted alongside them by accident. The person that's giving us this information is one of the main workers at the Caldea organization, and that is Dr. Roman. He tells us that he's surprised that Ritsuka even made it because you need first-rate magic circuits to even make it through the transfer. Otherwise, it's very possible that you could lose your existence in the process. At this point, Roman starts to get on to Mash about the way that she's dressed, saying that her outfit is way too revealing. That's not the way that he raised her. What are you doing? And to that, she says it's not her fault. She had to transform in order to protect me. Transform? Are you smoking them tweeds again? Did you hit your head on something? And she tells him to check her stats. Then he starts to consider that it might be something else. So he goes over to check her condition, and he realizes that everything has improved. Her physical strength, her magical circuits, her durability, everything. Then he tells us that she's no longer a regular human, she has now turned into a servant. A demi-servant to be exact. Before they got there, there was a servant that was already present who was sent by Caldea to deal with the Fuyuki situation. This was Sir Galahad of the Round Table. However, since Sir Galahad's master died in the recent explosion at Caldea, he decided to offer a contract to Mash before he completely vanished. That way, at the very least, it could ensure her survival, though the story doesn't tell you who that servant is at the time. So now that this explosion has happened, Roman decides to cut communication with us because they're on backup generators and they're running on limited resources. Mash also brings up the fact that the Fuyuki that they're seeing is nothing like the one presented in their research. It's completely flamed out and the magical energy is near the level of true ether. We hear some screams nearby and find that it's Olga Animusphere, the current director at Caldea. She's in shock that Mash has turned into a demi-servant. Up until this point in time, she mentions that it's an experiment that the organization has been working on, but it's never been successful until now. So now that Olga is starting to come back to her senses, she begins to recognize exactly who Ritsuka is. Wait a minute, you're that dude that showed up late to my speech, you slacker. She was actually offended that Ritsuka was able to form a contract with Mash and make her his servant, considering that he would have to be a first-rate magus in order to do this. I guess we're also gonna completely forget that Waver was the master of Iskander and pretend like that didn't happen. She then starts to tell us that Caldea has coffins that are specifically made for race shifting. If the success rate is less than 95%, the coffins will turn off on their own to avoid casualties. But for all of us, it's a rare case. Somehow we've been teleported without being in the coffins altogether. For the time being, Olga wants us to look for a ley line terminal, one of the several points in the land where the magical energy is the strongest. That way we'll be able to contact Roman again and get direct support. And to that, Mash tells her, director, in case you haven't noticed, you're standing on the terminal. Really? I knew that. So using her Noble Phantasm, which is her shield, as a catalyst, Mash starts to set up a summoning circle and the connection was a success. Once we got it going, Roman starts to brief us on what's been going down. He tells us that there's less than 20 people on staff, including him, and the only reason that he's running it now is because no other higher up survived the explosion. 47 people have been critically injured, and he believes that the supervisor, Lev Laner, is dead. He believes that the 47 aren't going to make it because they don't have enough supplies to go around. But something that he forgot about that Olga reminded him of is the coffins. They come with the cryopreserve feature, so she tells him to at least put them in there for the time being and worry about the rest later. This really caught Mash's attention because using this feature without permission from her higher ups could easily result in termination for Olga, yet she still gave out the order and put the people's lives in front of her job job anyway. Roman tells us for the time being that Caldea has lost 80% of its functions. One thing that still has him in shock is Olga's bravery. He tells her that usually you're not the type of person to hit the front lines. And to that, she tells him, you just don't know when to shut up. The only reason I'm doing this is because if this doesn't get resolved, it all falls down on me. The association is gonna be on my neck, and I'd rather not have those problems. Once we finish up the intermission with Roman, we go into a flashback of Olga giving her speech today before all of this went down. The candidates, the people that have been chosen to serve at Caldea, have been selected from nations all over the world because of their talents, mainly their potential to be race shifted and become a master. Olga then tells them, I want to make this very clear so there's no misunderstandings. Caldea is mine and you serve under me. The only reason you're here is to do my bidding and save humanity. Your family heritage means nothing here. And at this point, there's a bunch of people in the crowd whispering about Olga, basically saying, is she insane? Which, if we're being completely honest, this is actually how jobs work. But you can't just come out and tell people this, right? Because then they're gonna feel away. But she's not lying. This is really just bad social skills 101. And this is when she notices Ritsuka, and she finds out that she actually put him to sleep. I know for a fact that you're not sleeping during my lecture. There's no way, my eyes must be playing tricks on me. But she can't focus on him too much because everybody else is now starting to give her pushback. Your standards are ridiculous. You're telling us that family doesn't matter, especially considering that we're mages? What are you even saying right now? You're in way over your head. And Olga doubles down by saying, listen, I said what I said. You're entitled to get mad, and I'm entitled to not give a fuck. You don't like it? Leave. Kick rocks. But just remember where Caldea is located. We're on the top of a mountain in Antarctica, and the last time I checked, there's no flights going back. So have fun with that. Now, like I was saying before I was rudely interrupted, we will be the hands that protect humanity. We have several new creations on our side in order to do so. The observation tool Laplace that can pull records from the past. We have the global model of the entire world, which is Caldea's. We have Sheba, the lens that allows us to look into the future. We have the heroic spirit summoning system, which is Fate, that allows us to bring out our own servants. And we have the Spiritron engine Trismegistus that allows us to race shift. With all of these things combined, we can look at least 100 years into the future. Now, looking at the mini globe of the world Caldea's, there's something that needs to be addressed. Using the future lens Sheba, we're able to peer down on the planet and see how things are gonna turn out. If the light shows, then we're good. If it doesn't, then we're screwed. And as of 6 months ago, the light hasn't been showing, which means that humanity is on the way to extinction. I'm sure you all know what that means. If we allow the date to reach that point before fixing it, we will all be erased from existence. But don't get too discouraged, we do have the technology. By using Laplace and Trismegistus in unison, we were able to look back into the past, that being 2,000 years worth of information. And what we found was a blip in the matrix, an alteration in time that's not supposed to be there. In other words, a singularity. This is in the year 2004 in the city Fuyuki, where a supposed Grail War was taking place. For the time being, we'll call it Singularity F. On the bright side, we just got the green light from the United Nations to use the ray shift technology. So what we're gonna do now is go back into the past and fix that mistake so we all don't die. Essentially, ray shifting is time traveling, but you have to have exceptional magic circuits and have the ability to become a master to do it. That's where you guys come in. Based on your records, you are the ones that are most compatible for being turned into Spiritrons and being sent over via ray shift. The first group of people that we're gonna send out is of course the A team, the top 8 scorers of Caldea. They are well trained and ready to go to war, and gives out the order to give him some sparring immediately. immediately. Mash thought it would be a good idea for Professor Lev to come, but he says that he's conveniently gonna be missing for 2 hours. I gotta work on this race shift system, I'll drop in when I can. Now that she's reminded us via flashback, we start to get attacked by more monsters in the Singularity. One thing that Ritsuka still can't wrap his head around is why is she always so angry. She's unbearable. And then Mash explains that there's still a lot of things that you don't know. For starters, Caldea is a research facility created strictly for the purpose of saving humanity. Many countries try to pitch in for the funding, but most of it comes from the Majors Association. With that being said, the rules for keeping it afloat is very strict. Many things can get treated as a crime, and if they feel like it, they can come crashing down on everybody. If you really think about it, Olga could be way worse. Which, speaking of, she decides to use her powers to heal Mash since she's been fighting off all of the monsters nearby. Roman also chimes in and gives his 2 cents about Olga. You gotta consider that Caldea was created by the Animusphere family. This started with Marsberry Animusphere, one of the 12 lords of the Clock Tower. However, when he passed away 3 years ago, Olga was the one that had to take his place. Now, all of a sudden, she has to fill in his shoes, or the Mages Association is gonna take the entire organization away from their family. So though it might not seem like it, she's still fairly new to this, and she's just trying to do the best that she can. Her attitude is honestly just a farce, and in the past 6 months alone, I've seen her work herself into the ground. I really feel bad for her. After Roman's rant, we come back to Olga saying who were the main people that created the tools at Caldea, saying that her father made the fate summoning system, and her and Professor Lev co-created the Shiba lens. She tells us that her father found out about the Fuyuki Grail War in 2010. Once he realized this, he made the fate summoning system. In FGO's version of the war, Saber is the one that came out on top, and the city was never destroyed. But as you can see, some things must have panned out differently in the Singularity. Then Mash tells us that since she doesn't know the servant that she's fused with, her output has been decreased. She also can't release the true name of her phantasm. So she's stuck with what she has, and at times it makes her feel inefficient, something that everybody disagrees with. But again, Olga just blames Ritsuka, saying that the reason she's like this is because he has no potential. She then mentions that once this is taken care of, she's gonna get a first-rate master, a real master to the field ASAP. She also mentioned that due to the nature of a singularity, the counterforce sometimes might not be able to intervene. Mash tells Ritsuka not to worry too much about the criticism. She feels like he's the best master. At this point is when we run into our first servant from the war, and that is Shadow Medusa. Roman tells us that it's too early for Mash to fight against a servant, but we go against her anyway and end up taking her down. Then right after the fact, 2 more servants show up. This includes Hassan of the Cursed Arm and Benkei. All of these spirits being in their shadow form. And right when it was getting too overwhelming is when Ku shows up to save us. You know, Ku was in the Fuyuki Grail War, he was summoned as a Lancer, but this time around in FGO, he's been summoned in the Caster class. Though personally, he's not a big fan of this class. Of course, this being because he likes to get into the mix personally. This is a part where the adaptation started to take liberties. In the adaptation, it had Ku show up early while we were still fighting against Medusa. This was never the case. It also completely excluded the fights with Hassan and Benkei. Ku then tells us in this version of the war, Saber came through and truck sticked everybody. Archer, Lancer, Rider, Berserker, Assassin. She beat them all. And then once they were defeated, all of them were turned into shadow variants of themselves through the process of the Grail Mud. The shadows then started to search for something alongside the monsters that we've been fighting off the whole time. That in mind, Ku is the only other servant that's managed to survive. He mentions that if he was summoned as a Lancer, he could have one-shotted Saber, but considering the circumstance of him being a caster, he needs our help to even stand a chance. Mash tells us that not only is he efficient with his spear, but he's also a top-tier servant. He can easily fit into nearly every class that there is, which is why he ended up being a mage. Eventually, we come to the conclusion that if we can get to the Greater Grail, we can find the source of everything that's going on. He says that going against Emiya is an easy clap, but Heracles is a completely different story even for Saber. Mash brings up the fact that she wouldn't be much help considering that she can't use her phantasm. Ku tells her, you're just not circulating your magical energy right. You gotta really get into it. Say it with your chest. So Mash, taking this direct, she just starts yelling out of nowhere. Am I doing it? Am I saying it with my chest? And Olga is just freaking out. Would you stop yelling in my ear? And Ku has to clarify, no, I don't mean it like that. That was a metaphor. I mean, like, you have to put more heart into it. You do got good spirit though. Call me Coach Ku, we're gonna get you in shape. So he starts to write runes that bring misfortune on the inside of Olga's coat. And she's like, what are you doing? And he tells her this is a part of the training. And then all the monsters that they've been fending off start to come directly for Olga, which is where Mash comes in between. The idea is that she needs to use all of her energy so she can recalibrate what she has. So it gets to a point where Mash feels like she can't take any more. And then Ku tells her, okay, this is your last test. Now you gotta fight me. I gotta do what? And he starts to summon his phantasm. And through the sheer amount of friction, Mash was able to release a pseudo version of her phantasm without releasing the name, this later being named by Olga and called Lord Caldea's. Ku mentions when she pulled this off, she didn't have a scratch on her, and she's easily a first-rate servant, which is a big deal considering that he's one as well. They go to the cave where the Greater Grail is located, and they find that Shadow Emiya is the one protecting the front door. Once we defeat him, he compliments them on their power. But now we have a problem with Ritsuka. He went from not being a master at all to having his magical circuits run at full capacity in order to help Mash function. Roman then advises that Ritsuka takes a break. In the meantime, you had Olga offer him some citrus for his headache, and then goes on to tell him, I can't lie, you've been doing an okay job. And everybody is just in shock because she gave Ritsuka a compliment. Even Roman had to chime in again like, wow, actually telling Ritsuka that he did a good job? You must be sick. Would you get off the line, you idiot? Like I said before, you're all just tools to me. Look, even the monster agrees with me. Monster? Mash, would you get this thing away from me? So they pull up to the Greater Grail, and what they find is that not only is Artoria in the war, but she has now been transformed into Saber Alter. Ku starts to reaffirm that since she holds the Excalibur, she's an extremely formidable opponent. She's an absolute monster. Even the slightest miscalculation will end in the top half of your body flying across the room. So they're all standing in front of her having this conversation. Wait, you can talk? It's time for the true test, Mash. Let's see what that shield is really worth. And of course, who can forget the old classic? Salter then uses Excalibur Vortigern against Mash, and she completely tanks it. Ku then follows this up by summoning his Wicker Man, throwing Salter into his cage and burning her alive. Before she disappears, she mentions that her power has weakened and that the outcome will always be the same when she decides to fight alone, claiming that Grand Order has begun, and she takes her leave. Ku also starts to disappear because them defeating Salter would mark the end of the Grail War. But something that really has Olga's skin crawling is the fact that Salter knew the name Grand Order. That's a phrase that Olga just made up today. She picks up the crystal that Saber left behind, and then we start to hear clapping in the background. I didn't think you guys would make it this far, saying that it was a big mistake to overlook the potential of Ritsuka. And the person that comes out from the darkness is Professor Lev Laner, the same Lev Laner that works at Caldea. Roman, I hear that you survived too. I thought I told you to go to the command room where the explosion was. Why didn't you listen, Roman? You're not supposed to be here. It makes me sick. I could just throw up right now. Mash then points out the fact that that can't possibly be the true Lev Laner. Something's taken over him. But Olga, being in shambles and complete denial, she runs up to Lev like none of these things were said. Lev, I am so glad that you're here. Can you please bail me out? You know, like old times, this has really been a lot. I agree with you, Olga. This has been a lot. But you know what irritates me the most? You, Olga. I put the bomb right underneath your feet. How are you still alive? I'm joking. You're not alive anymore. You're already dead. Your body blew up along with the explosion. That's the only reason you were able to get here. You don't have the Magus qualities to get here with the body. The only reason it worked is because your body is already gone. So even if you do race shift back to the present, you won't be able to go back because your soul has nowhere to return to. He reveals the same tool that she believes to be Caldea's. Since they were just in the singularity, Olga believes that it's only an illusion, but Lev corrects her by saying since he has the Holy Grail, he can stitch together two different dimensions. So he stitched the present with the time that he was in. What she notices about the tool now is that the entire globe of Caldea's has been consumed in Inferno. See, Olga, this is what happens when you're not good enough. The tool has now been turned to the equivalent of a fake sun. What a shame it would be if somebody got near it. Then he starts to lift Olga up via telekinesis, and he tells her that anybody that gets tossed into this tool now will suffer a death on a molecular level. Since her body is already gone, not only will Olga die, but she will continue to die for an eternity, even when the singularity is over. At this point, Olga starts to reveal her true face, saying that nobody ever loved her, nobody ever accepted her, and that's why she always took Caldea so serious. It was the only accomplishment under her belt that would have made her feel somewhat good about herself. Now that was being taken away too, and she begins to start crying, saying that she doesn't want to die yet. Lev responds by saying, well, Olga, since you love your precious Caldea so much, I will grant your wish and allow you to be one with it forever. And he tosses her into the Inferno. Not gonna lie, looking back, him hearing her say all that and still tossing her into the Inferno, this man is truly evil. But considering who he actually is, makes a lot of sense. With him being filled with rage, Ritsuka was about to dash straight into Lev Laner until Mash stopped him, saying that if he did this, he would die just like Olga. He begins to praise Mash for this, for understanding that he's not a life form that's like them. Allow me to reintroduce myself. I am Lev Laner Floros. The idea that you had about the future was a bit too optimistic. It's not that the future is about to self-destruct, it's already over. You want to know why you can't get help from the outside? Because there is no outside to get help from. The world is gone, and the magnetic field around Caldea is the only reason it survived. This is officially our rejection of humanity. Human history is finished. He also goes into the fact that Salter actually disobeyed him by trying to keep the singularity afloat when she wasn't supposed to. It's almost as if her being the wielder of Excalibur won't allow her to completely forego the planet and the people on it. At that point, Lev disappears and the singularity starts to collapse. Roman tells us, I'm working on a way to get you guys out, but on the off chance that I don't make it, just find a way to float through space until I do. Shut up, Roman, and get us out of here. We wake up back at Caldea, and the first person that we see is Leonardo da Vinci. Except now, Leonardo is looking kinda thick. When did this happen? Are you surprised to see someone so beautiful such as myself? Don't worry, I'm used to it. Anyway, I'm Da Vinci. I'm the third servant that was summoned at Caldea. We later end up in a conversation with Roman, having him congratulate us for our efforts and saying that it's really a terrible thing what happened to Olga, but we can't slow down now. What Caldea has turned into is equivalent to a space colony. Everything has been destroyed. After running some scans with Sheba, he's starting to realize that these singularities are different. Normally, tampering with the past would ultimately change the future, but these singularities happen to be turning points in history. What if this country didn't become separated? What if this war never came to an end? What if this voyage never happened? All points that are necessary to mankind. By having these singularities exist, it would cause mankind to implode. And that's why we have to go back into the past and fix them. All 7 of them. You'll go to each singularity, find the relic, find the grail, and get out of there. The other masters are still frozen, so you guys are the ones that have to do it. It's official. The First Order has now turned into the Grand Order. All you have to do is save the world, but no pressure.